My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasakaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. How are you all doing? I hope all of you all are doing well. Let me today continue with Swamiji's teachings on light. He speaks about light. I think I covered the last week on light. I'll continue. I'll recap the concept of light. As I mentioned the last time, light is nothing but electromagnetic radiation. That radiation was essentially, the crucibles of our Big Bang, we are able to cognize it using the human eye. So there are certain frequencies that we can actually detect. There are certain frequencies we cannot detect, so other animals would be able to. So definitely, in terms of light is we can cognize. It's an electromagnetic field. It is also a stream of photons, or what we call, quantum of energy, and it travels in waves and different. Has the different colors. Though a white light has, have different colors that one can, get if you pass the light through a prism. How does it link to the principle that Swamiji talked about? He talked about the first principle about the eye, that which gives us consciousness, and thoughts are diffusion of that consciousness, and energy is the pulsation of that consciousness or vibration. And we saw, and Swamiji goes on to say that that vibration gives rise to light. Light is photons. So everything reverberates, and the reverberation, you have the movements of electrons, protons, and so on. And each of the building blocks have that. The different levels of electrons, protons determines what the building blocks are. So in this case, photon is a building block of this vibration, as what Swamiji calls I, the light. So here, formless form of I is fire, or what he calls light. So it's formless, but it has a form, right? So we see that, the light, when you switch on the light, it's actually photon traveling, and in the form of a spectrum. So we see that, the light emanates from the origin of our universe, the Big Bang. And in the Big Bang, there was nothing. And then the emergence of this primordial atom, which is so dense, everything was packed in it. And how the reaction took place, and you had this Big Bang that unleashed all the energy that was embedded in there. Some of you may ask, why did the primordial atom emerge from nothingness? And I think if you followed, I believe the lecture 1 or lecture 3 or 4, the explanation is there. So here I want to speak more about this primordial light, the primordial light that gave rise to, cosmic inflation and everything else in this universe, planets, sun, stars, earth, plants, biological beings, sentient and insentient things. So all these are from this universe, and every one of them have a core. You have electrons, protons, all those things. And you see that all of them have that fire embedded in it, and that fire emanates from that vibration. So we see that we are now 13.82 billion years since the beginning. Light has traveled, vibrations started off basic building blocks, and then it became more complex, molecules. Eventually, the complexity intensified until where we are today, where we have sentient beings that are able to think about, all the insentient and the sentient things that are happening in this universe. So the link between the principle 1, 2, and 3 is that we have principle 4, which is actually, from vibrations emanate, light. So this is why you see that, when your senses become quiet and you don't see anything, you don't cognize anything with your eyes, eventually all you get is the vibration. So the vibration is the one gave rise to the light, or the ability to see spectrums. When that seeing of the spectrums quieten down, you will get that vibration. That is why in the state of deep meditation, you get that resonation or vibration of the Bhagavan's Gita. So this is the principle 4 that Swamiji talks about. I want to come to this. I covered this before. So how does light come in play? So again, we have this cosmic symphony from Irul nothingness, the higher order continuum, before our universe even exists, or predates our universe. This is a formless, or we can call it infinite, and that infiniteness, one of the possibilities, our universe, which is 4-dimensional, 3-dimensional space and time. So everything collapsed into that one dot, and eventually the intensity of the heat gave rise to the Big Bang, and we saw vibrations, what scientists call strings, that emanates quarks, which is a form of light, a refined form of light, and then you get another more grosser form of light called protons, and that gave rise to atoms and cells and all those things that gave rise to our body. So we see that from nothingness, the vibration have given rise to light, which has given rise to the multiple suns, the bright sunlight that is everywhere in this universe, including our own sun. And within our own solar system, we have planets. Within our planet, we have the sun, the core. And within that planet that gave rise to all biological beings, you have cells. Within that cells, you have, the same pattern of electrons and protons. Ultimately, at the core, you see also light and vibrations. And that is why when we sit down quietly and meditate, when the mind becomes very quiet, all you get is the vibration. The light has become vibration, and the vibration can become light. So if we have good vibration, we are very inspired. We see things in an inspirational way. If our vibrations are not so good, we don't cultivate that dharmic vibration, you see that impacts the way we see the world around us. So this light is very important. And Swamiji goes on to explain that, this light, or what he calls the nature of fire, he says fire by scintillating becomes sparks, which ultimately break into atoms. This is the process I'm explaining. These atoms cohere and form all objects and worlds of the universe. See, objects is of like feathers and unlike, features and unlike features. So some are very similar and others are dissimilar, and it's caused by the magnitude, the speed of what it's traveling, and the intensity of the heat. So you see that you have very hot planets and hot galaxies, you have cooler ones. They all kind of forms in clusters, right? He says in the same way, that imprint is on our body. He says in the same way, our body also is a fire. How the universe emanates fire, came from fire. Everything, every particle in this universe also has that fire. He says that, our body also is fire. The blood that comes through it and the semen that secretes in it are also fire. He says likewise, trees, the seeds, sky, cloud, water, land, and air are all fire. You have molecules in the air. You say warmth, heat, ether, vapor, light, luster, or fire it is several names that, so you see that fire emanates in the form of heat, ether, vapor, all those things. So even fire takes on different forms. You see, all worlds, planets, and stars revolve around this fire in a clockwise direction. So then he goes on to explain, so that means that all of that is embedded in us, and the universe has its own dynamics, and the same dynamics you can see in our own bodies, right? So he then goes on to explain what the sun is, why the sun is very important for our planets. We are all solar beings. Without the sun, our body would not have developed. So that's why some people do Surya Namaskar. pray to the sun, because you get the radiation and the vitamin D that strengthens the body, right? So he says that all this, so remember that the semen or the embryo is nothing but the same original light. So even our source of our creation, our being, our body, is also because of that fire. He says that we talk and run, dance and sing. We learn many arts and craft. We humble ourselves, beg and serve. Due to the avarice, learn and invent various trades. So we go on to developing trade, climb mountains, fly, fight and hunt, all these things, if you look at it from a retrospective within us, it all comes from within us. The doing and the jobs and the professions and what we learn, what we unlearn. So it is all of it. All this is within ourselves. He says, ourselves become, when we know this, we become wise, and we see that only to feed the stomach with the light in the form of agriculture products. So he says that we breathe our air, that's light. What we eat, all the vegetables, there is light there, everything that we eat, smell, do, everything is all because of light. So we are actually light standing on light, right? So, and that is why we see that, without that light, we would not have cognition. And that is why we call enlightenment, the ability to know, right? So here he goes on to explain what the sun is, and why the sun is very important. So he explains that, the sun's power is so important to nourish everything in this, our, earth, you see. So, and the sun, is none other than having the same properties as, our body, our cells, and so on. So here he explains that, if you understand this, right, if you are able to transcend that bodily to that light in you, that Unarvu in you, the vibration in you, not the physical form, not Mahendhiran, but, that which animates this body called Mahendhiran, right? The soul has got no name, but it animates the body. For example, it's like someone who's driving a Toyota, a Honda, or Holden, where the car has the name, but the driver is somebody else. So that driver is the illuminator, how to drive the car, how to do this, and how to do that, and how to learn. So we see that that driver is what Swamiji calls that, it's a manifestation of that is actually the light. He says that, that, light, if the mind is inspired by this, the mind becomes enlightened. The mind transcends to this formless infinite potential, the mind becomes infinite and potential. He says that, the state of happiness is common to one and all. That means that state of enlightenment, that Jyoti, the Paranjyoti, is same for everybody. The difference is that the Guru knows and the disciple may know or may not know. Right? So again, he says that, you have a sense of happiness, of discovering. You would know what Gayatri mantra means. You know everything that scriptures are saying, you're able to be aware of it and cognize it and be illumined by it. He says that clarity of knowledge brings tranquility. So that enlightenment gives you better understanding. Better understanding gives you greater tranquility. So he says that this is what the initiation of that self-realization is. You start with gross, then you internalize it, and then you start slowly understanding the thoughts, and don't partake in it. You go deeper, even that will disappear. Ultimately, you come to a state where I am neither the body nor anything material. I am that spirit, that light, that Jyoti. So again, in this deep meditation, one attains that. So he says that our body is the light and it's the source of enlightenment. Right? So while our body is the light, it is powered by a much more bigger cosmic light that is the source of that enlightenment of this universe. He says that the state of happiness is common to one and all, truthful, triumphs and shines everywhere. So you see that when you practice this, and you're able to understand that light that illumines everyone, when you shine the light, it goes in all directions. Your mind, who's attained enlightenment, will just do the same thing. You'll be able to go in multiple ways. And yet you have time for meditation and that self-exploration. So he says that the state of happiness is common to one and all. Truthfulness triumphs and the shines everywhere. So you're able to see in the great clarity what's right and what's wrong. This is a state of viveka, your mind. It's a clarity of knowledge brings on tranquility. So goes on to say that when the mind is quiet, the mind has a time to now rejuvenate, repair, and become more deeper, right? So that is why the very early morning meditation is very important. Every day, half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, whenever you get, right? Time to do it. So here he says that shines everywhere. Clarity of knowledge brings tranquility. Initiation of the self-realization leads to higher knowledge. This is the Paranjoti Paripurna Jnanam, right? So he says that all of us must start. Maybe we get distracted here and there, but if we continue the long-term path, we will understand what this light is about. He goes on to say that, as the clouds hide the sun, your doubts hide the brightness of your intelligence. If you always have, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that, we see that, we actually block ourselves from realizing the true inner self that we have. When we drop all that frivolous, unnecessary thoughts, and when the soul reaches out to you, it'll fully engulf the entire brain. And you'll see that you have a glow, you have a tejas, you have a confidence, right? So again, you see that goes back to fully understanding what this graduation, Okay, so this is the source of enlightenment, and we see that the tranquility and peace and calm, so when the light slowly, the material light starts dissipating, the inner light starts, so we graduate from one state to another state. So we graduate from the state of materiality to the state of spirituality. The spiritual light becomes more and more, pronounced or prominent. And you see that the whole body engulfs, the tejas shows up. So here he says the clarity of this knowledge brings tranquility. So, and he says that the initiation of that self-realization leads to higher knowledge. So the mind continuously, becomes engulfed with this light. It goes through a transition, or what I call graduation from one step to the other. And he says that as the clouds hide the sun, so sometimes we have material thoughts, doubts, queries, you see, the doubts hide the brightness and the intelligence in us. So whenever we have this, thoughts that are, frivolous thoughts, but, unnecessary thoughts, you see that it blocks us, right? But as the walls obstruct, similar, like, when the light is passing by, you put your hands, you see the shadow. So sometimes there are shadows that form in our mind that blocks us from understanding who we are. He says that, as the walls obstruct the light, your hatred obstructs the light of your intelligence. Right? This is the illumination. That is why, Swamiji always says, that have good thoughts, have noble thoughts, have inspirational thoughts, so that slowly you are able to transition or graduate to a higher level of wisdom and enlightenment. So whenever you have thoughts, whenever you have doubts, always clarify it, do some research, pursue an inquiring mind, so that what was unillumined becomes illumined. What is not enlightened, you don't feel that, you are not aware of things, you become more aware of it. He says, have your doubts cleared by critical inquiry and with the help of an experienced person. So you try it out yourself, experience, do research, all those things. If you cannot get it, you speak to somebody who has walked the path. He says, get rid of the mentality of the drunkenness, the hatred, and all those things. He says that, as in this Bhagavad Gita scripture, Sri Krishna tells to Arjuna that, when he couldn't fight the battle or take on his enemies, he says, you've got karpanya dosha, that means shrunken mind. Here Swamiji is saying that, these doubts, if you don't clarify it, it makes your mind shrunk. You'll always be thinking about it. But the moment you illumine by it, aware of it, it'll disappear. And you see that ultimately you can experience other things, become enlightened by it, and ultimately you experience yourself. So this is what Swamiji speaks about, this whole notion of light. Our body is a light, it's a source of enlightenment. And this light emanates in the form of, electrons, protons. It is also what we call the Kundalini Shakti, the life force in all of us. The force that powers our life, our biological body, the ability to brain, to think, cognize, all those things. So we see that this cosmic intelligence or this cosmic symphony is critical for us to attain an enlightened life. And that is why every morning, that introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation enables us to be in this space of enlightenment, to realize that we are an enlightened being. So allocate time every day, consistently, never take your eyes away from that illumination, and live and illumine an enlightened life. Sandosham.